Good morning. Tap the screen, guys. Tap the screen. Nostradamus is a funny name. I just saw that. That is really funny. I think I needed to laugh. That is hilarious. That's a really. Oh, guys, tap the screen. Good morning. Good morning. Lots going on. I feel like this election is just. It's coming at us whether we want it to or not. Good morning. Good morning. Someone's name in here is Nostradamus. That's hilarious. Oh, sorry, let me get some water and some more caffeine. And this week's just starting. I don't even know how we're going to survive it, but we are. Things are getting super, super busy. So keep tapping the screen, guys. Hello. I just want to, let me do this quickly. I just wanted to shout out someone really quick. Jamie, thank you so much for the donation to support me covering all of these Democratic Party events in the swing state of Arizona. It is much appreciated and much needed this week. We have a lot of distance to cover. Yesterday it was 2 events. As of last night, it's 3, possibly 4. So I don't know. I need to also be mindful of like my mental health and physical exhaustion. So I'm like trying to take that into account. But some of these events are so big, it just would seem, like I'm doing us a disservice if I do not cover them. Like this is only going to happen the month before a presidential election, happens once every 4 years. So I just keep telling myself, I'm just going to push through as much as possible and then, sleep in the end of once the election is actually declared and we're sure who has won. that's the plan as of now. But thank you, JB, for your donation for gas money. Like I said, it will be much needed. So update on which I think the Discord saw last night. I finally figured out where today there is a second gentleman. This is what they're calling it. Second gentleman of the United States rally for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. So Doug Emhoff is leading the rally. Obviously, I assume he won't be the only speaker because it's a rally that's billed for, it's hours. So we shall see how this goes. But I like call time, as I like to call it, is for me is 5 p.m. We have special access to like the friends and family type. We're moving up on the list of people they are no longer worried about. So yeah, we have like the friends and family seating and access. We'll see if that gets us anything better. My only goal is really just to get a really good shot, like for you guys, like the best possible camera angles and access to the most possible, speakers. So we've been doing a great job. Like I said, I've been sending, the campaign or the speech videos I'm taking for you guys that I'm posting on my TikTok and editing and sending them over to the Democratic Party, and they really like them. So hopefully we'll be able to get a good view today. I don't know any other speakers. I just know it's billed as the second gentleman of the United States rally, and there is seemingly a huge focus, this week on Arizona with like as far as people coming here to visit. So I don't know if it'll be people we've already seen or new people. No word on that. But again, I'm going to and this one has, what do you call, I just forgot the words, TSA, security clearance that you have to get through. So whenever I get through security clearance, find a good camera angle that I think is good, then I will go live. So probably, let's say, hopefully by 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, I plan on being live. And then again, we've talked about this. I still don't know the start time or the physical location. Like I said, I'll probably find that out 24 hours before the event, which is Wednesday. But I will be taking us one way or another. That remains to be seen, the 120 miles to Tucson, because I think post-debate, it's really important to me, and it should be really important to all of us. I want to support Tim Walz, and he has a rally going on in Tucson that we were invited to, again, with like special creator access. So I think it's important to go. It's far, but not extremely far where it will be too much of a burden. So again, when I find out what time he starts and find out exactly where it's located, I will give you guys more information. Oh, you volunteered for phone banking? Yeah, I was canvassing on Sunday, and there's lots of phone banking events. Like there's tons of things you can sign up for with Arizona Democrats all over the battleground state of Arizona. Like this is ground zero of political action. It's also fascinating to watch. I really had no idea. Like I don't think I understood exactly how hectic the month before a presidential campaign is in a battleground state, but we are getting a front row seat for that. Like it is pretty intense. So again, I'm still waiting to hear on Wednesday where the rally is in Tucson and what time. As soon as I find that stuff out, I will let you guys know. Yes, I did meet. Well, I don't think it's more that like people are so mad at you about it's more like in Phoenix, especially the neighborhood we were in. Like, I think knocking on people's doors in general is like people are like, what are you doing kind of thing. But yes, I did get in a heated discussion with someone. But I mean, that's Arizona for you. That's not surprising at all. People have very black and white political opinions. You rarely meet someone that's just like, I'm on the fence. But I thought what was really interesting about where we were canvassing is it's a predominantly like Hispanic, or it has large Hispanic and black populations. Of Arizona, there are millions and millions. I think it's like 6 million, maybe more, 6 million people in Arizona, or possibly more. I don't know what the total number is right now. I can't remember. But only like 4.6%, I think, are black voters in Arizona. So it's actually quite a small number. And then there's a lot of apathy and non-turnout. So that's like what we were doing, particularly in that canvassing area, and why it was so cool that like Kerry Washington came, Jasmine Crockett came, Michael Ealy, because that's what it was about. They were giving us more information about black voters in Arizona and turning out the black vote, as well as the Hispanic vote. So it was super motivating. Like they had a whole team of Spanish speakers who were canvassing, what they knew to be Spanish speaking houses. It was fascinating to watch. And then I would say, I never told you guys this yesterday, but probably the most interesting part, if you were watching the stream yesterday, was the moment when Kerry Washington was just like, oh, and I brought another friend. And keep in mind, we're in like, Central Phoenix, not the best neighborhood, close to where I grew up. Like I feel comfortable there, but what many people who live in the suburbs of Phoenix would consider not a good neighborhood. We're like next to this like barber shop, like, and a cash like payday loan place. And this is just a random field office. And there's like Jasmine Crockett, Kerry Washington, Michael Ealy, Jessica Alba. And then they brought a friend. And you know who it was? It was Glenn Close. Glenn Close is just standing in like Central Phoenix. Like I didn't even notice she was there. And she actually was like super inspiring and super interesting. Yeah, Glenn Close of all the random people. And then later, because that was the first campaign event, and that's when I met Jasmine Crockett and I'm so glad I went to that smaller event because it was super motivating and cool. But then also, Jasmine Crockett was like, I think more available for photos and talking to people and stuff like that because it was early in the morning. Like this was like 9 a.m. And then later at that other event, which was essentially like a lot of black fraternities and sororities and people who went to historically black colleges and other places like that. It was super cool. So it was about getting out the black vote in Arizona. And it was so funny because then like Glenn Close is there. It was like Eric Holder, like Obama's AG, Susan Rice, who's like the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, one of the most inspiring like black women ever to hear speak. I guess she's like living in Phoenix for the next 30 days. She'll be here stumping for the campaign for 30 days. So I'm hoping at some event in the next 30 days, I'm going to get to talk to Susan Rice because she's actually like one of my idols. I could not believe she was at that Jennifer Garner event, which that was like in the suburbs, right? That was like in a rich neighborhood in like South Tempe, Arizona, like upper middle class. The event was like upper middle class, like white women and their daughters predominantly. And then Susan Rice just starts talking and nobody knew who she was. And I was like, what is happening? Susan Rice is here. And nobody knew who she was. But you could tell at the event on Sunday, clearly more people knew like what a big deal she was. But yeah, hopefully we'll run into her again. So anyways, that's just a story for you that I never told you guys yesterday. But yeah, looking forward to seeing who we can get on the stream tonight, tomorrow. And then again, I mentioned this in the Discord last night, but we have been invited to a really big event on Thursday. I just applied for the security clearance last night, so I don't know where it is. I don't have information about it, but we shall see. Yeah, bigger than Tuesday and Wednesday. So Thursday we will again be at another rally, and it will be super exciting, hopefully. And as soon as I actually get approved to be at that event and get more information, I'll let you guys know. So either tomorrow or wait, is it Tuesday? Yeah, it's Tuesday. Definitely by tomorrow I'll let you guys know more information about that event. So big things happening, and another possible Kamala sighting this week on the live stream. I could not be more ecstatic. Okay, we have so much BS to cover today. I have reached my like absolute breaking point with the misinformation around FEMA stuff. So we're all about to learn how to debunk FEMA information. Oh, and one more thing. Ronald, thank you so much. Thanks for the great coverage. I appreciate it, Ronald. Thank you so much. Like every dollar, like I will literally be putting this week towards gas money or any other supplies I need to cover these events. So everything is appreciated because we have to cover a far distance this week. But it is absolutely worth it. Like if there's one theme I keep hearing people say at these events is, like Susan Rice was talking about it, like just make sure, leave it all on the field. Like don't be sitting there in November wishing that you had done more, wishing you knocked on more doors, wishing you phone banked and didn't, and like that's what I just keep in my mind is like I have the pleasure and the privilege to be in a battleground state. So I'm going to do absolutely as much as I can to make sure that come middle of November, I'm not like, man, if I would have just gone to one more event or knocked down one more door or talked to one more person, right? So that is the goal. Keep tapping the screen, guys. Let's see. Other things. I have a million things I could talk about, but I want to get to some of the FEMA stuff because I'm literally at my wit's end. And then new polling came out too. So that's literally three things I wanted to talk to you about, just like breaking news, breaking news, breaking news. So now this, I'm actually taking this information from somebody I do not like. Okay, so just to be clear, before anyone says this is biased information about FEMA, this is written by a Republican who literally worked for Ron DeSantis. And I can't remember, there's someone else too who's like particularly awful. So, but that's why I'm taking this from something, this is written by a right-wing gross Republican who writes sometimes for the Center for Immigration Studies, right? So this is somebody who is writing critically or trying to find ways to like pin things on the Democrats, but does a very bad job. So I just want to make that clear is this is coming from somebody like a immigration expert who's trying to pin things and blame things on the Democrats. But with FEMA money, the disaster relief fund, the most important thing to note, the money that comes like after hurricanes or things of that nature, the disaster relief fund, none of that money has ever gone to migrants. If you don't understand how appropriations bills work, right? Congress is in charge of the purse. They appropriate where our tax dollars go, to which agencies, which buckets, which programs. That's a fact. The disaster relief fund has nothing to do with migrants, but I want to get into what is under FEMA that does, right? Hold on, okay. So in this article, if anyone wants to read it, it's kind of sickening because again, it's written by a Ron DeSantis sycophant, but it's called Making Sense of FEMA's Migrant Payment Schemes, right? It's an explanation. And I think he gets the crux of it all right. So where this originates, emergency food and shelter, or this is the FEMA program that actually helps migrants with shelter, not migrants directly, right? And keep in mind, not undocumented immigrants, right? These are people in the United States legally, right? For instance, asylum seekers who are in this country legally awaiting court dates that could have been sped up to 6 months' time, but Donald Trump killed the bipartisan border bill that would have provided the funding in order to move these people and adjudicate their cases faster. So again, all of this can always be blamed on the Republicans who didn't want to speed up the process. So this money that is being allocated, that's why, right? People are here from like 6 months to 8 years at this point. Okay, so it's called the Emergency Food and Shelter Program, or it's originally called that. Appropriations bills are very confusing. ESFP, if you see that, that's what they're talking about. That was the FEMA Migrant Spending Program. It began as an offshoot of who? Republicans. This was a Reagan era plan to help the unhoused. So again, started by Republicans, which was called the Emergency Food and Shelter Program. Okay, so EFSP had a goal of providing aid to unhoused Americans, most notably like the elderly, handicapped, families with kids, Native Americans, and especially veterans, right? So that was essentially where the emergency food and shelter program funding went until a border crisis. And you guys might remember who was responsible for said border crisis. Keep tapping the screen, guys. Share the live. In the late spring and early summer of 2019, during the Trump administration, when Donald J. Trump was president. So more than 111,000 adult migrants traveling with children in family units, remember? And then in addition to that, unaccompanied alien children, which is a gross name, but that's what they call UACs, is what they call them, crossed the border that May, and President Trump needed additional money to get the kids out of the CBP facilities that he had them in prisons, remember? So that's when FEMA, right? There was a bucket made. It came from the offshoot emergency food and shelter program that a Republican, Ronald Reagan, had in fact started. Thank you, Sully. Good morning. And then later became an offshoot of that, started by Donald Trump. So when you want to know who started using a FEMA bucket that was originally for the unhoused on people, not undocumented immigrants, but people, asylum seekers, that was Donald Trump in 2019. So make sure, Republicans, that you are blaming Donald Trump if you have a problem with this. Again, remember, it's Congress that does appropriations bills. The 118th Congress, right, is the House is controlled by the Republicans. They are the ones who set the budgets, or are supposed to. Now, you may or may not know, we're still on Nancy Pelosi's budget, because the 118th Congress, ran by your party, the Republicans, have been the least successful. They are on track to be the least successful Congress of all time. They have done nothing, including write their own budget. So yeah, we still are, in fact, on Nancy Pelosi's budget. But the amounts that are put in these buckets could and are negotiated, right? There's different amounts that go into these every time the appropriations bills are set based on need. So this all started with Donald Trump in 2019. And this article likes to point out that the Democrats left Trump twisting in the wind when he needed this FEMA money. Like, people weren't sure in Congress if they should reappropriate FEMA money for that was originally going to unhoused U.S. citizens for asylum seekers, right? But I personally, I understand asylum seekers are in our country legally and therefore are our responsibility. So I don't actually fault Trump for doing this, but I do think that Republicans are pretending in their disturbed and usually incorrect minds that this somehow started with Joe Biden or started with Kamala Harris, when in fact it started with Donald Trump in 2019. Let us never forget that fact. So that's when it became an offshoot of the Emergency Food and Shelter Program. It was called Emergency Supplemental Appropriations for Humanitarian Assistance and Security at the Southern Border Act. Again, under Donald Trump. It was finally delivered in late June 2019 to Trump's desk to sign. It expanded EFSP by providing $30 million for assistance to aliens, which I cannot stand these words, but these are government terms. Assistance to aliens released from DHS custody, but then only to jurisdictions or local recipient organizations serving communities that have experienced a significant influx of such aliens. So, right, that would be the majority of this money, because I have been looking into this all morning, it does go to states or like local city municipalities. And then the remaining are like for NGOs, non-governmental organizations who apply for it, and they're helping to house asylum seekers or things of that nature. There's two different buckets that you can essentially apply for. So Trump started ESFP, the humanitarian assistance thing. And this is funny because I actually do agree with what this guy says here. Ronald Reagan himself used to say, and this is a quote from Reagan, "A government bureau is the nearest thing to eternal life we'll ever see on this earth." That's the problem with appropriations. Like, once you create a government bureau and like a bucket for money, it's almost impossible to then disband it. Like, that's why you see people saying, oh, we're just going to starve this bucket of funding, because it's almost impossible to get the votes to then disband it. So again, let's all remember this was started by Trump, and then consequently, ESFP, the Emergency Food and Shelter Program, received $125 million in fiscal year 2020 and $130 million in fiscal year 2021. Thanks, Donald Trump. Anyway, so then after taking office, right, this continued to happening. They continued, and part of that was the American Rescue Plan. President Biden pushed for and received spending legislation called the American Rescue Plan, right? And that American Rescue Plan appropriated $400 million for what FEMA then termed as regular EFSP. So that's for $400 million for, not for asylum seekers and migrants here illegally, but for, like we said, what originally was Reagan's plan for the unhoused, like veterans, the disabled, things of that nature, right? So fiscal year 2022, $400 million went to the regular EFSP, and an additional $110 million, which is right on pace with how it was being funded under Trump, for humanitarian relief to families and individuals encountered by the Department of Homeland Security, right? The temporary ESFP for migrants, so that's now called in a separate bucket. It's not the $400 million for regular unhoused American citizens is separate. There's a separate bucket now called ESFP-H for humanitarians, right? And since Donald Trump created it as a separate line item in 2019, it now exists. So again, we've been on pace with what has been appropriated through there. In fiscal year 2022, those appropriations shifted with $130 million for regular, with an additional $150 million for what they term as the humanitarians, which is the asylum seekers. So then in fiscal year 2023, the FEMA request for this appropriation was $130 million for regular and $154 million for the migrant version. The request explained, quote, "Since 2019, services to migrants provided by NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and local jurisdictions have significantly increased and in many cases quadrupled," right? Because of the surges at the border, because we destabilized a bunch of economies, more people showed up at the southern border, so more money was needed to be appropriated. It's not even much more, but that's how we essentially got here. So again, this program, which has absolutely nothing to do with hurricane money, with the disaster relief fund, nothing, absolutely nothing. That is a separate bucket. That money is separate. Never the two shall be mixed, right? This is EFSP, Emergency Food and Shelter Program -H for humanitarian assistance, particularly for migrants seeking asylum who are here legally with a court date. Now, my advice to any Republicans or bigots listening who are like, I don't like this, okay, well then you need to get Congress. For instance, you've been in charge of the House. The Republicans have been in charge of appropriations bills, but can't get anything done. So you guys could have, all this time you've been sitting here, could have done something about this and did nothing, right? I would suggest taking that up with Republicans in the House if in fact you have a problem with this. Or in addition to that, and I did extensive research on this because I just want to know that, you guys to know that also you might hear it called Shelter and Services Program. ESFPH-H has morphed into the FEMA Shelter and Services Program. So whether it's labeled as ESFP-H or SSP, these are the same programs. In 2023, they started naming it as a different line item, as sometimes happens, but same exact programs. Yeah. And then so a little bit more, the disaster relief fund, completely separate. I did do some deep dives on this and I want to make sure I get it right. So I want to read it exactly. Now, the question is, because I know people probably wonder about this, can you move money, any money at all, between these buckets? Like all of this is under Department of Homeland Security, or it goes Department of Homeland Security. Underneath that is FEMA, right? And underneath FEMA, there are these separate buckets. There's the Disaster Relief Fund. There's, EFSPH or SS shelter, SSP, depending on what they are calling it today. Now, in Title 501C of the fiscal year 2024 appropriations bills, these ones that just have been happening, right? Up to 5% of any appropriation made available for the current 5% of any appropriation made available for the current 5% of any appropriation made available for the current fiscal tiny amount. It's not like at any moment they could say, oh, let's take all the money that is allocated in the ESFP 8-H for asylum seekers that Trump started or the SSP money, and let's move it to the disaster relief fund. You could move 5% of it, but then it would require 30 days notice. And it's a negligible amount essentially. So essentially, once these buckets are appropriated, the Republicans in the House are in control of this, right? And they appropriated this money. Donald Trump started the separate bucket for migrants. If you're wondering where it came from, your Lord and Savior, Donald Trump started it, and the Republicans are continuing to fund that bucket. Make it make sense. I know, shocking to find out. Yet again, it was all you guys. Do you guys ever get tired of being perpetually wrong about anything? About any and everything? I would probably. If Donald Trump said something to me, I would never say it out loud, knowing that probably I was going to be wrong and end up being humiliated. You could do your own research. That is all written out by a Republican, and it's 19 in the outlines. Oh yeah, and just so you guys know, today's outline, we're gonna have it posted like in the next couple hours. Chrissy, who is amazing, Foster and Friends, she is in the path of Milton. I mean, not direct. I don't think she has to evacuate at this point, but enough that she is trying to secure her house. If you guys want to send her a note and just let her know that your thoughts are with her. I think we are all, the more research I do on Milton, the more disturbing it looks, right? If you guys don't know about Milton, I suggest number 6 in the outline. There's a great Washington Post article that's written about this and explains it. But I think the bottom line is, anybody who knows anything about hurricanes know that they don't move west to east, right? Not since 1850 has a hurricane moved west to east and gained and became over a category 2 that made landfall. This is literally unprecedented times, right? Oh yeah, and we'll get to the 60 Minutes interview. I did clip the 60 Minutes interview. I think the most important thing to know about that 60 Minutes interview is that Donald Trump was supposed to be part of it. He was supposed to be interviewed and started crying because 60 Minutes was going to fact check him and then refused. I mean, he gave multiple reasons, all of which made no sense, but one he did fully admit, like at one point, which they said, 60 Minutes was response was, we fact check every interview, not so, Trump didn't do it because 60 Minutes is too reputable of a publication or of a media source. They won't allow him to pathologically lie without pointing out that he is pathologically lying, which is a problem for Donald Trump. So he did not even do the interview. And if you saw what was going on yesterday in the news, where was Trump? Doing a town hall with Laura Ingraham, which I will say, I'm going to add my backup because that's what I want to show you guys some clips. And I want to debunk a bunch more FEMA things, but I'm going to show you guys clips because even Laura Ingraham was correcting him. Like, I've never heard Laura Ingraham. I think Fox told her, like, you can't let him just lie about the FEMA money. He tried the like $750 lie, and she corrected it. Like, not with her full chest, but for Laura Ingraham, you know what I mean? Like, as close as you can come to an actual correction that I've ever seen her give. I'm sorry. I forgot to mute my backup. That was the best effort I've ever seen her give of correcting Donald Trump's lies. So even Fox is like, we're not going to lie about natural disasters, I guess. Which for Fox, I mean, that's a big deal. They've come a long way. Like, I've long wondered if Fox had any lines. How do I mute this? Okay, got it. Poor Mayorkas, God, he's like back in the thick of it. God, he just must be like, could somebody year and a half? You could tell like these lies aren't even phasing him. Like, he's already been like censured, like all the things that have happened to Mayorkas. He's like, just like, yep, this is par for the course. I am completely prepared to debunk a million Republican lies. Okay, so let me just get to the right section in the outline because we have to. Did you guys see Trump? He's literally at like a memorial, a Jewish memorial with rabbis yesterday, and is asking to sign their prayer books. Like, Trump had a really bad day yesterday of just when you think Trump cannot get any worse, it gets much, much, much. That rabbi was like, what in the, like, you're literally at a memorial. It's like this most somber moment, and Trump's like leafing through a book, being like, do you want me to sign this? And the guy's like, no. You just can't write this stuff. So yeah, this is going to be just some debunking of lies, and then peppered in with more lies, and then we're going to debunk them. I've spent a lot of time yesterday fact checking because I think we're par for the course. Like, Republicans they're pathological liars at this point. To be part of the Republican Party, you have to be on board with an unprecedented amount of lying. Like, like, you really have to say, like, I'm not interested in telling the American people the truth. But when we just had one of the worst hurricanes in Helene, and Milton is fast approaching, people are terrified, and you're willing to lie about FEMA, about how people can get access to help, I think that is a bridge too far. Oh, let me reset the gift goal real quick, and then we'll get this party started. Ooh, witchy kitty, that looks cute. I haven't seen that one. I should do more Halloween ones. Okay.
A little bit about misinformation, the spreading of it, and the impact of it. And I said kind of in there, this is not normal. I've been around this town for a long time under Democratic, Republican presidents. Not that everything's been perfect, but you've also spent a lot of time in government. The level of misinformation that we're seeing right now that's spreading, that's giving people inaccurate understandings of what's happening with the hurricane. Have you seen this before?
I have not seen it ever before at this level. You and I both remember a time when an extreme weather event, a natural disaster, actually brought people together. Now, unfortunately, tragically, quite frankly, it is politicized. And what happens is the people who are victimized by the natural disaster are the ones who will suffer. It sows distrust in their government, and therefore they don't seek the help that they truly funds in their pocket See, it also debilitates, Jen, our workforce. These are individuals who are putting their lives on the line to serve.
Like government can't help them. Government can't help them, so they're not seeking the information that they are entitled to, which is very alarming.
Yes, it is very alarming. It is very alarming. And just remember who has made this a political issue. There are local Republicans who are having to go, or who are at the worst possible time. We have Okay, and this is going to be becoming important as we debunk lies. This is one of VP Pence's assistants, right? Like, this is someone that used to work for Mike Pence. And this will become important as Republican lies develop.
What do you make of that sort of playing out?
I think everyone's still being afraid of having that Chris Christie hugging Obama moment of embracing, a different political partisan. But the reality is, time there was a major natural disaster, he would also be calling governors, members of Congress in the areas that were affected. It's not just the president. So yes, she's a candidate, but it's also an entirely appropriate thing for the vice president of the United States to be doing. And it's a moment for him to rise to the occasion of leadership and show, hurricanes don't choose Republicans or Democrats. This is going to be a whole of government effort. And I would just also note that, especially North Carolina, and we don't even know what damage Milton is going to cause, there is going to be years of rebuilding. There's going to need to be congressional supplementals to pay for this. Those are things that are done on a bipartisan basis. And Donald Trump stoking fear, lying about it now, doesn't exactly bode well for, if he is to be reelected, that he's going to assist those areas and that he's not going to let politics affect it, and he's going to work across the aisle to get people what they actually need.
So
across the aisle to get.
I'm sure people in Florida are noticing that DeSantis has lost his little mind. He is apparently refusing to get on the phone with Kamala Harris. And that's why I'm saying this is important. As you see DeSantis's little meltdowns yesterday, he ended the day on Hannity yelling nonsense, which we'll see in a little bit. But I just want to point out that whether vice president or president, right, this is someone that used to work with Mike Pence, saying, of course, Mike Pence used to reach out to governors during natural disasters. It's absolutely appropriate that the vice president reach out to Ron DeSantis when there is an incoming second natural disaster on the way, right?
North Carolina that was hit is overwhelmingly Republican. Donald Trump, of the 25 counties that are under emergency declaration, Donald Trump won all of them but two. There are about 185,000 more Republicans than there are Democrats in that area. So by spreading this misinformation, you're hurting your own voters first. And we know Donald Trump takes his people sort of as a special case. He's damaging them for his own political goods. That's malicious.
Kristen.
So think about that, right? It's very reminiscent. I was thinking about this when I was listening to this yesterday. This is extremely COVID, right? Why would you steer so many Republican voters wrong? That could lead to them being extremely sick, if not being unalived, right? Wouldn't it be, if you cared about your constituents, and particularly Trump, right? Who, it's been said, plays like the Hunger Games with governors. Like, if you don't support Donald Trump, he will not give you like assistance fast, right? He slow plays it. He had, governor said that he had governors like fighting each other like the Hunger Games for PPP. So these, though, that's what I want to make it clear about North Carolina. These rural areas that are affected, these are his voters. And it is more important to him to lie to his voters, for them to believe there's no assistance available, than to help them in their time of greatest need. Like, that is despicable. I mean, other than COVID, I couldn't think of another example in my mind where I was like, oh yeah, he doesn't care if his constituents live or die. And not just the entire American public, because yeah, if you're a good person and there's disasters or a pandemic happening, it shouldn't matter what anyone's, who anyone voted for. But these are people in his own voting districts that he carried, rural areas of North Carolina. And it's more important to them to lie. It's more important to sell them a pack of lies than to help them get FEMA assistance. That's one of the lowest things he's ever done. I think second only to the pandemic. Oh, sorry. I don't know why that's there. Oh my gosh. Okay, prepare yourselves. Trigger warning, just prepare yourselves. This is going to get dark, but we're going to debunk the stuff, right? Because you should hear why, if you're wondering why so many MAGA, and not just MAGA, but even any type, I think everyone that claims to be a Republican at this point is MAGA. I think that's fair to say. But I'm three examples of what Maria Bartiromo was doing yesterday. Like the non-stop lies for Maria Bartiromo. Just brace yourselves.
And the fact that they're running out of money when they've spent it on everything but what they're supposed to spend it on, including illegal immigrants, people who came here who are now being supported by our dollars. And I'm talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. This is egregious. This is why they ran out of money. This is why they keep on spending on the wrong things, and America gets left in the dirt.
Well, Karine Jean-Pierre basically laid it all out a couple of years ago and told us what they were doing with FEMA money. Now, this morning, the White House is denying that they actually used FEMA money and they cleaned out the whole FEMA emergency fund. That's why they're running out of money, because they sent billions of dollars to house and care for illegal migrants. So the White House, I mean, last week, DHS Secretary, and I know you and your colleagues have answers from DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas on FEMA redirecting billions of aid to illegal migrants. FEMA is denying it, but we looked at the past administration and found White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre back in 2022 laying it all out that emergency money is going to be used for migrants. Watch this.
FEMA regional administrators have been meeting with city officials on site to coordinate available federal support from FEMA and other federal agencies. Funding is also available through FEMA's emergency food and shelter program to eligible local governments and non-for-profit organizations upon request to support humanitarian relief for migrants. We'll continue to do what we can as a federal government to support these cities as we rebuild our asylum processing system after it was gutted by the Trump administration.
I mean, what a joke. September 1st, 2022, she lays it all out, how they're using emergency money from FEMA to help the illegal migrants, and she...
Okay, so again, that's why I wanted to take you guys through that article and explain it all before you had to hear this and lose your mind. So again, this is all a pack of lies, right? The emergency, did you hear what Karine Jean-Pierre said? She said, we just learned about this, under the Department of Homeland Security, there is FEMA. Underneath FEMA, there are buckets that Congress appropriates money to. Donald Trump himself created a new bucket in 2019 called the Emergency Food and Shelter Program -H, which was specifically used for migrants, right? For families with children, for asylum seekers who were being held in prisons, and they were like families with children and had to be moved, or for the unaccompanied minors in cages, right? Donald Trump created that bucket. It's now called SSP, Shelter Services, basically. Donald Trump created it, right? And you heard Karine Jean-Pierre, she's talking about emergency food and shelter -H, right? Which again is available to sanctuary cities or state governments and non-governmental organizations that can apply for it and are housing not undocumented immigrants, or as Maria likes to yell, people who are, and Representative Richard McCormick, people who arrived here illegally. No, that is not true. That is just another lie, right? It's asylum seekers. Donald Trump created that bucket the people in charge of both legislation and the purse strings, appropriations, the 118th Congress is run by who? Say it with me now. Republicans who still have us on Nancy Pelosi's budget because they have done nothing. But again, if you guys want any of this to change, Donald Trump started it. It was an offshoot of a program created by Ronald Reagan. And the 118th Congress in the House, who's in charge of appropriations, ran by Republicans, are continuing to fund it. Let's just get the story straight now. This is going to be available in the outline. This comes from there's so many articles that are coming out that are fact checking all of these FEMA lies. I think the media is doing a good job. This is from a great one I found. The article we went through this morning is separate. That's written by a Ron DeSantis sycophant. But this one it's from NPR, and it's called Fact Checking Falsehoods About FEMA Funding and Hurricane Helene. So Trump uses immigration attacks to make more false claims. This is not a good view of this. An August report from the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General argues that billions of dollars earmarked for disasters that occurred more than a decade ago could be returned to the Disaster Relief Fund. Let me zoom in again. Okay, but the false argument from Trump and other Republicans has been that the Biden administration diverted disaster money to take care of migrants. Here's the quote. They stole the FEMA money just like they stole it from a bank so they could give it to their illegal immigrants that they want to have vote for them this season, Trump said in Michigan last week. Again, non-citizens cannot vote in the election, and no disaster funds have been diverted. Instead, Trump and his allies are referring to the Shelter and Services Program, member SSP, that saw FEMA disseminate hundreds of millions in grants from Customs and Border Protection to municipalities that saw an influx of migrants. And NPR doesn't mention this, but a program started in 2019 by Donald Trump himself, which is the best part of the whole thing. That program was a separate funding source with a separate purpose, covering separate years and not relevant to the current hurricane recovery efforts. Meanwhile, Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson said Sunday he had no plans to bring lawmakers back from recess before the election to address requests for additional disaster relief as Hurricane Milton approaches the Florida coast as a Category 5 storm. If you know anything about the appropriations bills that are going on, they knew. The FEMA has known they're going to need additional disaster relief, right? All of the money that's been appropriated, we've had, I believe it's over 20 disasters that caused over $1 billion of damage, right? And that's before Helene and before Milton. So Congress needs to come back. Mike Johnson, the sad Speaker of the House, won't call them back because he wants them in their districts campaigning and spreading misinformation and disinformation for Donald Trump. But they're going to have to come back, right? And then the other reason they want to delay this vote is why. Believe me, we're going through all of it. Who votes against FEMA disaster relief? Not Democrats. He doesn't want to have this vote before the election because if they do, there would be another vote on record, which there was not 2 weeks ago, if you're following the appropriations votes. Republicans again were voting against FEMA aid, not 2 weeks ago. The same Republicans that are in the news. And they again would vote it down here. And he does not want that vote to happen before the election. So here we go. This is, if you recognize Pat Fallon, another particularly gross Republican in the House. See if any of this sounds familiar. This is like Maria's job, to just spread disinformation.
House Republicans, yourself included, want answers from DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas because apparently FEMA has redirected billions of dollars in aid from the emergency fund to illegal migrants. Now, FEMA and the White House is denying this, but White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre back in 2022 laid it all out. Watch this.
Here comes the same
FEMA regional administrators have been meeting with city officials on site to coordinate available federal support from FEMA and other federal agencies. Funding is also available through FEMA's emergency food and shelter program to eligible local governments and non-for-profit organizations upon request to support humanitarian relief for migrants. We'll continue to do what we can as a federal government to support these cities as we rebuild our asylum processing system after it was gutted by the Trump administration.
Congressman, give me a break. Okay, they can't say they did not redirect the FEMA emergency money to illegals. She just told us what they were doing. But my question is on you. You're an elected official. How are they getting away with this? Aren't there three branches of government here?
Notice how Pat Fallon does not answer her, because he knows that she's lying. Like, if I'll say, usually Pat Fallon goes on this show, it is like, I'm going to engage in some lying with Maria Bartiromo, and he just pivots. He does not answer what she's saying because it's a complete lie. And she knows. If you guys are too young or have tried to get amnesia about Maria Bartiromo, she used to be an extremely respected Wall Street, financial reporter. She's somebody who knows what she's saying is categorically false and is continuing to misconstrue it, right? She's continuing to spread lies.
Maria, that's a lot to unpack. It doesn't make you moral to try and help your neighbor when your own house is on fire. So I was one of those furious people when I read her tweet about helping, sending hundreds of millions of dollars to Lebanon. I honestly, first of all, they think money fell from the sky. I thought when I read it, she must have been talking about some town, Lebanon in Georgia or in North Carolina. No, she was talking about Lebanon in Asia Minor. I couldn't believe that.
So again, now Pat Fallon won't answer Maria Bartiromo's lies because he doesn't want to be on record agreeing with her because he knows it's a lie. And again, the only people who vote against disaster relief, and I'm not talking about the program Donald Trump started in 2019 for migrants. That's not disaster relief. I'm talking specifically about the disaster relief fund that's for American citizens whose homes are destroyed, who are displaced, who need emergency money. The only people that vote against that are Republicans, right? So Pat Fallon's pivoting, and you may have heard this conspiracy, right? Which is that Kamala made a tweet, what's happening in Lebanon, they're going to be sending aid money there, right? Again, though, not from the disaster relief fund. If you understand how appropriations work, which again, appropriations, who's in charge of appropriations? The Republicans are. Mike Johnson is the Speaker of the House. The Republicans are in charge, right? Appropriations money is appropriated, but never is money that we send to, say, Israel, or we send to Lebanon, or we send to Palestinians ever coming from the disaster relief fund. But if you're looking for the culprits of who consistently in Congress, as recently as 2 weeks ago, has voted against funding the disaster relief fund, that look no further than the Republicans. So again, this is just speaks to the claims. This is also from that NPR article, which is in the outline right in the middle of these Maria Bartiromo clips. This is just the other lie that they're telling, that FEMA is running out of money, right? And that's because of mismanagement and it was spent all on migrants. Like, this is just literally in real time. They're just debunking lie after lie after lie. So let me find this section and yeah, here we go. So another popular refrain that has gained traction on the right in recent days is the claim that FEMA has no money for hurricane recovery because of money spent on migrants, something that is not true. The money used in the aftermath of Helene and other major disasters is not part of FEMA's operating budget, right? Sorry, I just lost my place. But instead comes from the disaster relief fund. So again, know this, the money that goes out to citizens whose homes are destroyed, who are displaced, who need emergency assistance money, that comes from the DRF, the disaster relief fund that's appropriated by Congress. Now, FEMA's operating budget is a completely separate appropriation and a separate budget, So it is not true that FEMA's operating budget is taking money from disaster relief, or that Trump's give FEMA money to migrants program is taking money from disaster relief. None of that stuff is true. But instead so last week, Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas reportedly said the agency, meaning the FEMA operating budget, does not have the funds to make it through the rest of hurricane season, right? So when that's true, when they're looking around and saying, oh, we have more disasters than we have money, blah, 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 FEMA is required from the operating budget to share monthly status reports on the disaster relief fund. And before the end of the fiscal year, right, because they're on fiscal years, not calendar years. That's why this was all being announced, right? They're on fiscal years. The agency had to implement immediate needs funding, right? That's where they say, here's what we're going to need to make it through hurricane season. That puts a pause on some of the agency spending that is not tied to life-saving and life-sustaining efforts. So when they're looking at their budget, right, they can't, then they hire non-essential employees might be terminated, or people that, or if they're spending on frivolous things, they just start really watching the budget, and then they put Congress, the Republicans in the House who are in charge of the appropriations and the purse strings, on notice that we're going to need additional funding to make it through hurricane season. The most recent report that runs through August showed a projected deficit by the end of September, right? That's before. Now think about that. That's before Helene made landfall. There was a deficit. October is the start of the federal government's fiscal year. The government is on fiscal years, not regular years. And a stopgap spending measure approved by lawmakers last month that the Republicans all voted against. So if you're curious who tried not to give extra money to the disaster relief fund, don't worry, I'm going to take you through it. At the last year's baseline level of $20 billion. So in the last appropriations, they added $20 billion to the disaster relief fund because Mayorkas made it known, hey, we're running low, right? So though some of that money is reserved for ongoing recovery efforts from previous disasters and projects to mitigate future impacts. The White House, in a release yesterday afternoon, said FEMA, quote, has sufficient funding to both support the response to Hurricane Milton and continue to support the response to Hurricane Helene, including funding to support first responders and provide immediate assistance to disaster survivors. But eventually, just like Mike Johnson is trying not to do, because the Republicans are going to try to vote it down, just like they've tried to vote down the extra money. Now, keep in mind, not for migrants, right? Specifically for the disaster relief fund. Republicans tried to vote it down. So if anyone, MAGA, if you're looking for who to blame for who's trying to take or not give money to the disaster relief fund, that is the Republicans every time. And we'll go through the vote counts because I'm getting tired of the lies. Yeah, and then this talks about could they get more money soon. So the disaster relief fund is the first line of response while FEMA and other agencies assess damage and needs related to a specific disaster. So that's what, once that information is compiled, then the president sends a formal request to Congress, specifically to the House, who's in charge of the appropriations and the purse strings, right? And says, here, now that we survey the damage, here's the additional money that we're going to need Congress to approve, right? Congress has not yet passed supplemental funding for other disasters that occurred earlier this year. The Republicans refused to. Much to the frustration of members, communities recovering from floods, fires, and other major events. The Republicans refused to give more money to the disaster relief fund for all of the emergencies we've already had this last fiscal year. Even if they had approved the existing funding request, so even if they had, the money would not have been directed to Helene relief since the storm damage didn't happen, right, before Congress left Washington. So that's what's important. As it relates to Helene and Milton, before Congress and Milton, right, to have to I've always wondered why Florida elects Rick Scott and Marco Rubio, the two people that are constantly either not showing up for votes on disaster relief or are, voting them down. Your own senator, your disaster relief fund. And once they survey the damage from Helene, Biden will submit a request to Congress for more appropriation money, and that's when the vote will happen. But Mike Johnson is going to do everything he can to make sure it does not happen before the election. Yeah, that's okay. And the last one. So I had to show you guys this clip of the lies. This is Maria Bartiromo's bestie. You might have heard of Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee. Senator Marsha Blackburn is one of the #1 culprits of voting down disaster relief. This is a woman who is sitting on Fox News. 2 weeks ago, she voted against disaster relief. The $20 billion that was added, no thanks to her voting against it. And again, this is the money specifically going to disaster relief victims, to hurricane victims, to fires, to floods, U.S. citizens. Marsha Blackburn consistently votes against it. And then she's on X and making requests talking about we need disaster relief in Tennessee. Well, you vote against it every time, Marsha. It's getting very confusing for us with your never-ending lies.
This administration's foreign policy, and I'm wondering if you believe Kamala Harris will continue this should she be elected. I mean, she's facing criticism this morning from angry Americans because she pledged hundreds of millions more to Lebanon. Okay, Lebanon, at the same time that residents of North Carolina are struggling to recover from Hurricane Helene. I mean, these people in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, they've lost everything. And Harris posts this on X. I am concerned about the well-being of civilians suffering in Lebanon. The United States will provide $157 million in additional assistance to the people of Lebanon for essential needs such as food, shelter, water, protection, and sanitation. I mean, I know Tennessee was also hit hard, Senator. How is your state faring right now? And what do you want to say about the Biden-Harris response to what residents there in your towns need?
And in our state, we have 7 counties that are major disaster areas and communities that no longer exist, people that have lost everything. And on the Friday that my mayors are finally getting a phone call from FEMA, Maria, a phone call. What you have is you've got Antony Blinken and Kamala Harris sending $157 million to Lebanon.
Okay, so let's all learn together because Marsha Blackburn is a liar, okay? The only way to get money from FEMA to the people of Tennessee, the 7 counties she's saying have been affected by Hurricane Helene, is to fund the what? Now let's all say together, what did Marsha Blackburn consistently vote against as recently as 2 weeks ago? Oh yes, funding the disaster relief fund. Marsha is not being honest. And I thought this would be helpful. Again, this is from the NPR article. So as of Sunday, FEMA says it has provided more than $137 million in assistance to 6 states in the Southeast, including 7,000 federal personnel, nearly 15 million meals, 14 million liters of water, 157 generators, and more than 500,000 tarps. The agency also says more than 3,000 North Carolina residents have been rescued or supported by more than 1,200 urban search and rescue personnel with recovery efforts aided by National Guard and active duty troops. North Carolina has also received $100 million in federal transportation funds to rebuild roads and bridges washed out by the storm. That's separate money coming from what? A separate appropriation bucket. Now we're all learning. But what's important to remember about lying Marsha Blackburn is she is, oh, that's a bad picture. Poor Marsha. She is specifically voting against the money that would go to her citizens. She is. Marsha Blackburn has the nerve to be lying on Fox, acting like the money that goes to foreign aid will never be in the disaster relief fund, can never be in the disaster relief fund. But the 20 billion that they recently put in there, good old Marsha Blackburn voted against. She is a real piece of work. I could not agree. That is the best. That's a nice way. That's what we, bless her heart. That's what I hear they do in Tennessee. We just must bless her heart. Oh, and I was so annoyed last night when I was seeing that I found another article to debunk her lies. So yes, several U.S. Congress members from Tennessee voted against a spending bill that funded FEMA. Oh, that's really interesting. You don't say. Republican Representative Chuck Fleischmann was the only U.S. lawmaker. Did you hear that? Only U.S. lawmaker from East Tennessee who voted to approve a spending bill that funded FEMA. And think about all the other, sorry, I need to move this way, despicable people from Tennessee that are in Congress out there lying. Maybe you've heard of, I don't know, Tim Burchett, Andy Ogles. So a spending bill, now let's get it straight, Marsha, since you're on Fox News spreading your lies about who's not helping the people of Tennessee. Like, let's all get it straight. A spending bill passed by Congress allocated $20 billion to the Federal Emergency Management Agencies, that's FEMA, that's the acronym, Disaster Relief Fund, the only fund that can help hurricane victims ahead of Hurricane Helene's landfall. They saw Hurricane Helene was coming. They tacked an extra $20 billion onto the appropriations bill. At the end of September, right at the end of September, the United States Congress approved the stopgap spending bill to fund the government through December 20th. Some of the money in the bill could go to recovery efforts for the East Tennessee area. However, some lawmakers from East Tennessee who have a lying problem voted against the stopgap spending bill. Isn't it fun to learn the truth? Sorry. The bills fund several programs and several agencies, right? The Secret Service and the National Flood Insurance Program, right? That was a line item in this last appropriations bill that all these people voted against. Flood insurance, right? That help to save houses and repair people's houses, specifically in the Southeast. Yep, these people are voting against that. Again, Representative Chuck Fleischmann voted in favor of the spending bill. So there is one, we should all look up Chuck Fleischmann. There's one honest Republican in Tennessee. In addition to that, the continuing resolution, remember they're called CRs, right? Because they have never made their own budget. They're still on Nancy Pelosi's budget. There was language which will allow FEMA to encroach upon other FEMA funds that were designed for non-disasters. That's what I read you in the fiscal year 2024 appropriations. It's only 5%. You could shift 5% with 30 days notice from different FEMA buckets. Now, again, the money for Lebanon is not coming from a FEMA bucket. There's no shifting of that. That's just a lie. Foreign aid is separate and has nothing to do with this. But in theory, you could shift 5% of budgets with 30 days notice. Other members of the Tennessee caucus, this is your time, Marsha, and these are all notably awful people. Caucus voted against the bill. Those included Republican representatives Tim Burchett, thoughts and prayers to school unalivings, Tim Burchett, Andy Ogles, Andy, my entire family's last Christmas picture was us holding ARs, and John Rose. Tennessee's Republican senators Bill Hagerty and Marsha Blackburn also voted against this bill. How dare they have the nerve to be on Fox News lying about the Democratic Party, the people who are funding the disaster relief fund and providing the votes necessary, despite these people voting against it, to pull it over the line. You're welcome, Republicans in East Tennessee, North Carolina, Florida. While you spread lies about the Democratic Party, we are continuing to aid you with federal assistance and will continue to do so. Oh, and I liked this. This is at the end of the article because they're really calling these people out. I just find it funny. They contacted Marsha Blackburn's office And they were like, like, hey, you're acting like you care about disaster relief and you voted against it. And she said, this is the quote from her office: Senator Blackburn supports hurricane relief and will fight to ensure Tennesseans receive all federal assistance necessary to rebuild. Oh, except for the assistance she voted against. Senator Blackburn does not support a reckless spending spree that does nothing to reduce our deficit and funds flying illegals. Again, that's a lie. Into our country. And what did we learn today, people? She's acting like funding the disaster relief fund has something to do with the emergency food and shelter program, or the shelter services program, right? That Trump started in 2019. It does not. She voted against funding disaster relief and national flood insurance, right? Those are separate things from Trump's program to spend money on migrants, right? So just to be clear, she's lying even in her quotes. Oh, and this is the one they contacted Tim Burchett's office because he's particularly awful too. And this is what his people said. The continuing resolutions in September had many irresponsible spending policies I couldn't support in good conscience. Congress allocated $20 billion in FEMA funds last year, but the Biden administration used over $1 billion of it on illegal immigrants, right? Again, Donald Trump started the EFSP, which is now called the Shelter Services Program, right? Started that in 2009. And if you understand how budgets work, the Republicans of the 118th Congress, of which Tim Burchett is one, is in charge of appropriations. They keep funding these buckets, right? And to take it even further and continue blaming it on the Republicans, Donald Trump wanted the border crisis to be as bad as possible. He wanted to run on it. He killed the bipartisan border bill, right? Joe Biden asked for funding to speed up the asylum process. They keep saying illegals. These are not illegals. These are asylum seekers legally in our country who are waiting years-long processes because we don't have enough asylum judges, right? There was a proposal to get more and speed that process up from max, people are here for years and years and years awaiting these court dates to 6 months. But because Donald Trump said, kill the bill, blame me, that's why we're here now. No matter how you slice and dice this all leads back to the Republicans. That's the facts. And I just wanted you to hear, because I thought this was really good. This is an actual FEMA spokesperson. There have been several FEMA spokespersons going on the internet and trying to debunk lies. And I just think, especially since Milton is coming, this is helpful information.
So the governors in all the affected areas, regardless of political party, have all went on the record and said that they've been provided immediately by the administration, by FEMA, with all of the resources that they need. For those watching, you just listed some programs that could directly impact their lives. Small businesses, entrepreneurs, people making claims. These are pocketbook issues for people. So if you can, some people may not even know, the resources that are available to them and the types of things that they can actually apply for to, potentially deal with lost income and things like that. Can you go through just some of those things that you were just listing?
Absolutely. So we recently made changes to our individual assistance program. You can apply for individual assistance by going to a disasterassistance.gov or by applying through the phone number I provided earlier. But what we do is we help people that are even underinsured. Let's say you have a home insurance policy and the damages to your home exceed what the insurance company is going to provide you with. We now offer up to the statutory limit, which is $42,500, for any additional assistance that you might need for your home that wasn't covered by your insurance. We also provide displacement assistance. Let's say that you want to go stay on a friend's couch because that's easier for you because you have pets and you can't take them to a hotel. We will now reimburse you for funding if you're displaced from your home. We also offer serious needs assistance. That's a one-time $750 payment for things like food, medicine, any immediate supplies that you may need. And the program continues. So we're really here to help people, like I said, entrepreneurs, independent business owners. SBA provides small business loans for people that need to get back on their feet. But really, we really want to make sure we're reaching as many people as possible.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get to Project 2025, but yeah, Project 2025 is about defunding FEMA. That's part of Project 2025, which we've talked about, that and the National Weather and NOAA, which predicts these disasters, all of it. Yeah, part of 2025 is defunding federal assistance for the disaster relief fund. That is why Republicans are voting against it. This is not new stuff. The mandate for leadership, the policy section of Project 2025, again, started by Reagan, right? This has been going on and on. It is part of their politics to defund the disaster relief fund. They want to. So if, again, now think about, again, we talked about this, like particularly in North Carolina, all these rural counties and people that are affected, these are Trump voters that are being lied to about these services that are available to them. And meanwhile, unbeknownst to them, because how many people have time to follow congressional votes, the people doing the lying are trying to defund the disaster relief fund behind their backs while lying and saying, oh, this is Joe Biden's fault, while they're secretly going behind their backs and repeatedly trying to defund FEMA. That's the Republican Party. That's where we're at now. These people, they're serious. And again, I just included this. This is just the fact check about the $750. I think it's awful to lie to people. We just heard that FEMA spokesperson debunk the lie that all that's available to them is $750. That's what you can get immediately, right? Immediately. Right? They can't hand you a suitcase of cash. It's like what you can get immediately while your other claims are processed. And that's too bad that Donald Trump, and particularly all of his rural voters in North Carolina, are being lied to in real time. It's sad that that's what we've come to. This is Donald Trump at like 2:44 in the morning. Monday. The great people of North Carolina are being stood up by Harris and Biden, who are giving almost all of the FEMA money to illegal migrants. Now, keep in mind what we've learned today. It is Donald Trump who in 2019 started the FEMA bucket to give money to migrants. The man himself who started that program, started that line item in appropriations bills, is lying and trying to blame it on other people. Has any of the money from the disaster relief fund been given to the EFSP or SSP fund that gives money to migrants that Trump started? No, it has not. But what has happened is when they're trying to fund the disaster relief program, consistently, Republicans in the House and Senate are voting against it. The same Republicans who ironically are on Fox News lying. Oh, and this I just can't. I had to show you guys this. I guess I'm just trying to debunk lies that are being spread. I don't know if I can make this super visible, but let me just read it to you. Do you guys remember Candace Taylor from Georgia? She I can't remember what she ran for. Did she run for governor? This is a crazy MAGA individual. This says, and this is like in line, you've probably seen Marjorie Taylor Greene is spreading a bunch of lies about the Democrats can control the weather. You know, it's not in line. It's kind of in line with her space lasers lies. Well, this is Candace Taylor. There's many MAGA people on X that are saying that the lie goes like this, that the Biden administration can control the weather so that, and they're sending hurricanes to Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, so that Republicans can't vote. I wish I was joking about that. I am not joking. That is dead serious. That is what they're saying. Listen to what Candace Taylor says. The weather can and is being manipulated. Wake up. Stop being ignorant or plain stupid. There's no such thing as coincidences. The most important election in history is 30 days away, or the most important election in the history of America is 30 days away. Pray. Georgia voting has been compromised and don't know if we will be able to get all our early voting days in. Now a hurricane is coming straight for Florida. These two states are necessary for a Trump victory. No coincidence. God hides lions inside of sheep. I know you're in there somewhere. Make them terrified to cheat. This is our nation to lose or ours to keep. This is not weird, right? This is the talking point from MAGA, that Joe Biden can control the weather and they're purposely sending hurricanes towards red states that Trump needs to win the Electoral College so that Republicans cannot vote. I mean, I wish this wasn't where we were at now, but this is where we're at. And so this is just Olivia Beavers talking about Mike Johnson will not be calling the House back early to vote on disaster aid supplemental in the wake of the hurricane. He tells me the cost of damages has to be tabulated before a supplemental is considered. And he argued they are many days away from that. Congress will not convene for about 5 more weeks. Remember when I told you he does not want Congress voting on this supplemental because the Republicans are going to vote against it. If he can push this till after the election, he is pushing it till after the election. And this is just Ron Filipkowski, because you know me, I love Ron Filipkowski, commenting on that, saying, translation, it's far more important right now for Republicans to be in their districts and on the campaign trail for others like Trump than it is for them to report to work and get something done on disaster assistance, right? Who is politicizing this issue? If they care about their constituents, right? If we're allegedly sending hurricanes to stop red states from voting, why would they not provide the relief needed? Why not come back to DC? It's a Republican-controlled House. Only Mike Johnson can call them back for a vote, and he won't. If they wanted to help you, MAGA, why aren't they helping you? They're in complete control of providing more disaster relief and won't. Now, if you missed, there was a very gross press conference yesterday in which Peter Doocy was antagonizing Karine Jean-Pierre. It was gross. So just, again, trigger warning.
Thanks, Karine. We're learning that DeSantis refused to take a call from Vice President Harris specifically around Hurricane Milton. Can you just talk about that and any communication around this new hurricane?
Look, that is something for the governor to speak to himself. If you have the president and you have the vice president reaching out to offer up assistance provided to your constituents, the people who live in your state, to make sure we are doing everything that we need to do from a federal response, and we're reaching out, offering our support. That's for the governor. The governor is up to him if he wants to respond to us or not. But what we're doing is we're working with state and local officials to make sure that we are pre-positioned, to make sure that we are ready to be there for the communities that are going to be impacted. We are doing the job that is needed, that we believe is needed to protect the communities and to make sure that they have everything that is needed. You heard me talk about the declaration. We approved that for Florida. That's moving forward. Mm-hmm. And so we're taking this very, very seriously. That's for the governor to speak to. That is.
That declaration, which we'll get to that too, I provided proof of it somewhere in here, because you can never have too many facts in the face of constant MAGA lies. And again, all this will be made available in the Discord. Any of the clips you're seeing, any of the articles, any of the resources in order to fact check people or make content with, all of this will be available. And I wanted to read a joke. Georgie, thank you for the donation. And he says, you're amazing. No, you're amazing. Zane says, thank you for educating us. Thank you. I enjoy it immensely. Teacher Felice, miss teaching. Janice says, what does a mermaid use to clean her tail? This is funny. What does a mermaid use to clean her tail? tied. That's really funny. I like that one. I love a corny joke. But if you heard what Karine Jean-Pierre was saying there, she's saying we already approved the declaration. What she's saying is that for, I believe, Milton, they've already approved DeSantis's requests in advance of it making landfall. The Biden-Harris administration has preemptively approved the federal assistance request. So all this DeSantis flailing around, crying and yelling, not wanting to answer Kamala's phone calls, like in despite of all of the rudeness, it's already taken care of, Florida. So if that makes, and I know we have people in here who are like very concerned, that it's already been approved. Again, here's more from this press conference of doom.
Karen, I was wondering whether you could comment on remarks like former President Trump made this morning, linking migration, crime, and genetics, and more specifically this sentence, quote, "We've got a lot of bad genes in our country right now," unquote.
Yeah, so just to make sure you guys can hear, they're asking about she's asking about what Trump's doing, tying FEMA funds, making up lies and saying they're being redirected to migrants, which they are not. And Trump made a statement yesterday that was particularly disgusting and related to eugenics, and saying we have we have a lot of bad genes in this country. And she's asking Karine Jean-Pierre to comment on that.
Well, that type of language is hateful, it's disgusting, it's inappropriate, and has no place in our country. I just talked about misinformation, disinformation, and how we have seen a bipartisan response when it came to Hurricane Helene, and how we're trying to bring our country together. It is important to bring people together. And tearing people apart, tearing communities apart is dangerous. And this comes from the same vile statements that we've heard about migrants being poison the blood. That's disgusting. And so this president, this vice president, we're going to continue to forcefully reject this kind of vile, disturbing, hateful speech. It has no place in this country. And we have to respect the rights of all. Respect the rights of all of us coming together. That's what we want to see, not tearing communities apart, bringing it together. Okay.
Yeah, okay. And I saw some talk in the comments, so I'm just going to explain this. DeSantis submitted an emergency declaration for FEMA funding, that for Milton. That has been approved. That when presidential declarations do not come until after the full scale of damage is understood. That's Mike Johnson's excuse for not voting on supplemental FEMA aid prior to the election and calling Congress back, because presidential declarations don't come until they know exactly how much money is needed, so that the supplemental vote happens once in Congress. Okay, now comes the Peter Douchey part of this presentation. This is Peter Douchey addressing Karine Jean-Pierre. I do not know how press secretaries deal with Peter Douchey.
That's our focus here.
But President Biden is fond of saying, show me your budget and I will tell you what you value. If he's got money for people in Lebanon right now, without Congress having to come back, what does it say about his values? There's not enough money right now for people in North Carolina who need it. That's not misinformation.
Wait, no, that is your whole premise of the question is misinformation, sir. What you do? Yes, it's misinformation.
Is there money to send to Lebanon right now?
I just mentioned to you that we provided more than $200 million to folks who are impacted in the area, and I just shared with you that people are deciding not to. People are deciding not to.
Wait. To Congress that there's not enough money to help people in North Carolina.
We're talking about the SBA disaster loan.
That's money for people in North Carolina,
and that's important. And people in North Carolina need that. Wait, this is nothing new. Peter, this is nothing new.
And I just want to, because she doesn't correct this part of it, but again, foreign aid has nothing to do with the Department of Homeland Security or FEMA. which is funded underneath it. You cannot move, oopsies, you cannot move foreign aid, period. You cannot. There's no way. And that's why it's so annoying to hear people, remember when they were like, well, you're protecting Ukraine's borders and not ours. It doesn't matter. Even if that money wasn't sent to Ukraine, it's not going towards funding the disaster relief fund. Now, again, if you want to look at who's voting against funding the disaster relief fund, who wants to defund FEMA, that is the Republicans in Congress. You understand that this is all misdirection. Him saying, well, you got 157 million for Lebanon. That money will never go to a FEMA bucket, period. End of absolute story. It's just a lie. And she is right in what she's saying. He is using misdirection, but she didn't even call that part of it out. So I just need to say that.
Congress comes together, they provide money, millions of dollars, for disaster relief. We're asking them to do the job that they have been doing for some time.
The letter that President Biden sent to Johnson, McConnell, Schumer, and Jeffries. The president's letter is not misinformation. Would you agree?
No, the way you're asking me the question is misinformation. There is money that we are allocating to the impacted areas, and there's money there to help people who truly need it. There are survivors who need the funding, and it's there.
That you don't like misinformation.
I said that, I actually said we have the money available to help survivors of Hurricane Helene and also Hurricane Milton. Now there's going to be a shortfall, right? Because we don't know how bad Hurricane Milton is going to be. And so we're going to need additional funding. That's
exactly what I just asked about. And you said it was misinformation. Yes.
What you're asking me is why Congress needs to come back and do their job. That's what you're asking me. Congress needs to come back and do their job and provide extra assistance, extra funding to disaster relief fund. That's what Congress needs to do, and we're going to continue to urge that. You may not want that, but that's okay. That's what this president wants, and that's what the vice president wants. Thanks, everybody.
Preach. Karine Jean-Pierre, has she grown up, or how much better has she? I mean, I liked her in the beginning, but she's getting much better at speaking Peter douchey language, right? It's like immediately she's just like, stop, Peter. She's turning into Jen Psaki. It's like the minute Peter douchey would start speaking, she's just like, Peter, be quiet. Some of my favorite things would be to watch film of like Jen Psaki shutting Peter douchey down. Like if you ever just look, there's like highlight reels of Jen Psaki just being like, Peter, stop talking. And then just being like, I think what you're trying to say, but you're being disingenuous is, and it's funny because I actually like Steve Doocy. His father, who's like a very well-respected journalist and Fox News reporter, probably one of the last ones that like refuses to be a complete liar. He was like a John McCain type Republican. I really have no problem with Steve Doocy. It's his douchey son that seems to be an issue. But again, yeah, what is misleading about what Peter Douchy said is bringing up Lebanon foreign aid that will never end up in a FEMA bucket, period. And again, the people in control of appropriations in the House are the Republicans of the 118th Congress. Trump created the FEMA bucket that gave money to migrants in 2019. The 118th Congress, ran by Republicans, are continuing to fund that bucket. If you want any of that to change, you need to talk to your direct representatives in Congress, Republicans. And again, the disaster relief fund has never been touched, but for anything but U.S. citizens who've been exposed to disasters. And the only people in Congress who continually vote against funding it are Republicans. So again, if you're upset and you're worried about the disaster relief fund not being funded, that's Republicans. Direct representative democracy. Take it up with your local representatives, right? And in addition, it is written in the mandate for leadership, the policy section of Project 2025, to defund FEMA, to defund the disaster relief fund. That is why so many Republicans are voting against federal assistance. They don't want it to exist. So again, all roads lead back to the same party. Progressives, I'm fine with federal assistance. If you want, but that's the thing about Democrats, right? If you want To give federal assistance, though, you need to tax people. That's the irony, right? In order to manage a budget, if you're spending, you need to bring in more tax revenue. And that's what Kamala Harris's budget is about taxing who? The wealthy and corporations. They need to pay their fair share so we can provide things like disaster relief. I hope we are really painting a picture here today. We're really painting the picture for everyone, because I can't, Milton is about to make landfall, and we're not going through what we went through for another week. Now, oh my gosh, perfect timing, Felice. Now, this is going to make you cry, okay? This is how serious. Now, picture all of the misinformation and disinformation we have just debunked, okay? About Hurricane Helene, about FEMA, about the Disaster Relief Fund, about which buckets in FEMA go towards migrants. All of these are lies being spread by Donald Trump, MAGA, and the Republican Party to try to win an election. Natural disasters that have been hastened and worsened by climate crisis that also the Republican Party are responsible for and don't want to regulate. The irony is not lost on me. Now listen to this. This is an actual famous meteorologist in real time yesterday talking about Milton. This is how serious it is. The Republicans are lying and politicizing this. This is what's about to happen to Florida.
An emotional report from the NBC Miami meteorologist and hurricane specialist, John Morales. He was being interviewed live today when the news crossed that the storm had grown explosively into a Category 5. Watch.
We want to begin with hurricane specialist John Morales. John, now this monster of a hurricane is a Category 5?
Yes, that news just came out right now, and it's certainly, it's just an incredible hurricane. It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours. I apologize. This is just horrific. Maximum sustained winds are 160 miles per hour, and it is just gaining strength in the Gulf of Mexico, where you can imagine the winds. I mean, the seas are just so incredibly hot, record hot, as you might imagine. You know what's driving that. I don't need to tell you. Global warming, climate change, leading to this and becoming an increasing threat.
And do the Republicans care, or are they're lying to their own constituents to try to win a presidential election when their constituents are in the path of a nightmare? Lying about what's available to put their lives back together. Lying about it being diverted to migrant buckets, which it's not being diverted to. Voting against funding the very fund, the Disaster Relief Fund, the money comes from in Congress, while lying in their faces on Fox News. This is the Republican Party. This is who these people are. Now, I just included this clip because, Ron DeSantis had a little meltdown yesterday where he wouldn't answer Kamala's calls. So several times over this last week, he has made statements like this. And I just love facts. Again, all of these clips, any articles we're going over, all of this will be available in the Discord in the outline. If you need a link to the Discord, this is a TikTok account. It's at Felice Navidad Live. Just message that account and say, I need a Discord link. Because I assume when Milton makes landfall, this horrible cycle is going to start again. All these lies are going to just continue on, and we need all of this information. We need to be armed with this information and ready to explain to people that this is all a crock of S.
But everything we've asked for from President Biden, he has approved. And we do think we'll get more approvals for some of the individual assistance and the debris removal after landfall.
Okay, so, and again, I found 4 different clips where he is being honest. For whatever reason, I think he's proving his loyalty to Donald Trump by refusing to speak to Kamala. But just to be clear, Ron DeSantis admits he's talking about Milton and the incoming, that he has already had his emergency declaration for funding approved. So the fear mongering needs to stop. People are in danger. Now, this is Kamala before she got on a plane yesterday, and she's being asked about, you know, what's happening with DeSantis, him refusing to speak to her.
Governor DeSantis, NBC is reporting Governor DeSantis is ignoring your calls on hurricanes, resources, and help. How does that hurt the situation here?
You know, moments of crisis, if nothing else, should really be the moment that anyone who calls themselves a leader says they're going to put politics aside and put the people first. People are in desperate need of support right now, and playing political games at this moment in these crisis situations, these are the height of emergency situations, is just utterly irresponsible, and it is selfish, and it is about political gamesmanship instead of doing the job that you took an oath to do, which is to put the people first.
You tell me who's a leader. Who's a leader here? Who should be the next president of the United States? Someone that not just, right, because we know Trump has long been rumored to play Hunger Games with governors and deny aid to states that are blue, right? But his own constituents in rural North Carolina is allowing them to suffer and lying to them about the aid available to them to try to win an election. Who is a leader? I don't know. You ask. Everyone needs to ask themselves that question. Now, I alluded to little Ron DeSatan showing up on Hannity yesterday and having a little fit about Kamala. Like, this is how he ended his night yesterday. Poor little Ron.
Kamala Harris to try to say that my sole focus on the people of Florida is somehow selfish is delusional. She has no role in this. In fact, she's been vice president for 3.5 years. I've dealt with a number of storms under this administration. She has never contributed anything to any of these efforts. And so what I think is selfish is her trying to blunder into this. No, and here's the thing. She has no role. No, she has no role in this process. I'm in contact with the President of the United States. I'm in contact with FEMA director. I'm obviously managing all our state agencies. We're supporting all our local government. And I will say this. I've had storms under both President Trump and President Biden, and I've worked well with both of them. She's the first one who's trying to politicize the storm, and she's doing that just because of her campaign. She's trying to get some type of an edge. She knows she's doing poorly, and so she's playing these political games. I don't have time for political games.
Well, the New York Times Siena poll that came out this morning doesn't say she's doing poorly. That's an interesting statement to make, Ron. But again, do you remember when I said at the very beginning of this lesson that remember this when Mike Pence's former aide was on saying, yeah, it's Mike Pence used to, vice presidents and presidents, it's very normal for them both to call governors of states. Mike Pence reached out to governors of states all the time during times of natural disasters. And imagine, and he's saying that she's politicizing this. The Republican Party is spreading lies to their own constituents about the help that's available to them, saying the money has been given to FEMA buckets for migrants, which is a complete lie, all while secretly voting against funding the disaster relief fund. But Kamala Harris is politicizing this. The delusions are not lost on me. And this is a very Trump thing to make him do, to show up on Hannity and complain about Trump's opponent. Make it make sense. Oh, I think it does make sense. Yeah, and this is what I told you guys about a little while ago. Fun fact, the Biden-Harris administration has already approved Florida's request for federal assistance for Hurricane Milton, and FEMA is already on the ground pre-positioning resources to save DeSantis from his own incompetence. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. I find if that's data-driven MD on X, he's really funny. But yeah, so and again, all of these clips, all of these screenshots are available in the Discord to use and make content. I saw people saying they're posting things on TikTok like, This is super important. This is why I do what I do. It's like I want everyone to take this content and spread it far and wide. That's what we need to be doing, because this is about to start all over again with Hurricane Milton. Ooh, let me reset the live goal. Look at me doing things effectively today. Did it. Winning. Okay, and now for some call outs, because I do enjoy this. If you guys don't follow Kamala HQ, whoever is running it is hilarious. Because, you know, these are all the people that have been yelling and complaining. For instance, Margarine, you know, she's saying that the Democrats are controlling the weather. She's one of the main people spreading that specific lie. Thank you so much for subscribing. I appreciate it. I think that was Trisha. Thank you so much. So again, this is Marjorie. Oh, this is one of her tweets. She posted what about the weather's being controlled yesterday. But not only are Hurricane Helene victims only given an insulting, measly $750 and being left stranded, the U.S. government is giving $1 billion to Ukraine every single month to fund the Ukrainian government. Well, we learned today, right, that foreign aid can never be reappropriated into FEMA buckets. But the only way to fund the disaster relief fund is with supplemental and continuing resolutions that the Republicans are voting against. And these are just the roll call for the latest FEMA vote that all these people voted against, funding the National Flood Insurance and the Disaster Relief Fund. Tommy Tuberville. And if you look, and I have the links to all these in the Discord, and if you look this up, that's an actual clip of him complaining and lying. And yeah, this is the 118th Congress second session on passage of the bill N747. Tuberville, nay. Another person voting against FEMA funding. What do you know? It's always the Republicans telling lies. Lauren Boebert voted against FEMA funding 2 weeks ago. What do you know? And this is her quote. If a hurricane hit Kyiv, they'd be giving out $750 a second, not per family. Again, a complete lie. Much more is available than $750 per family. And in addition, foreign aid can never be moved into a Department of Homeland Security, namely FEMA bucket. So stop lying. But when they did try to fund the disaster relief fund, you, Lauren Boebert, fan of Beetlejuice, voted against it. Maybe less Andrew Jacksons at musicals and more voting yay rather than nay on funding the disaster relief fund. Just a thought. Oh, Byron Donalds, God, do the lies ever end? Byron is lost. Byron, who, if you don't know, is married to like one of the Moms for Liberty founders. And also, if you wonder, where did this black gentleman who's a Republican representative from Florida even come from? He seems to have appeared out of thin air. Yeah, he is a Rick Scott. You know, Rick Scott, who's the richest senator in Congress and got that way by one of the largest Medicare frauds in Florida history. Yeah, he's a sycophant created by Senator Rick Scott, who also votes against FEMA funding. Andrew Clyde, what do you know? Of course, voted against FEMA funding 2 weeks ago. And here's his quote. FEMA's mission to help Americans before and after disasters, yet the Biden-Harris administration has used more than $1 billion allocated to FEMA to house, well, he's saying illegal aliens. No, that's a lie. That's a complete lie. We did learn, however, that asylum seekers, people in the United States legally in 2019, Trump created a FEMA bucket and began giving money to migrants through that. Now, none of that money is part of the disaster relief fund, which goes to victims of hurricanes at all, nor has it ever been. So more lies. And then again with the other lie. Now FEMA claims it's running out of money and only offering Helene victims $750. That is a complete lie. That's what's available almost instantly, while your other claims that you have to make are approved, right? And FEMA is not running out of money, as I also debunked through that NPR article. They're just required to go on like savings while they say, hey, we're going to need additional supplemental funding, which can only come from Congress, the same Congress controlled by the Republican House who's in charge of appropriations, and those Republicans that are continually voting against funding the disaster relief fund. These people have no shame. Oh, here's Mike Collins, also voted against FEMA funding 2 weeks ago. Kamala Harris announced that those impacted by Hurricane Helene with immediate needs will receive a mere $750. Again, another lie from Mike Collins, who is trying to make sure that nobody gets any funding by not funding the disaster relief fund at all. Oh, Tim Burchett, the East Tennessee 4 that continually are voting against FEMA funding while hanging out with Maria Bartiromo complaining that Tennessee needs FEMA funding. Here's his tweet. When Kamala offers Americans $750 to folks devastated by the flood, remember the $1 billion given to illegals and the $200 billion given to Ukraine. Again, none of which comes from the disaster relief fund that Tim Burchett is continually voting against funding. It is part of Project 2025 to defund FEMA. And this is just I thought this was funny. This is just a video that someone made on TikTok of like the faces of all the people that voted against it. But in the interest of time, again, there's a link to this if you want to repost it or whatever, but it just goes through their actual like congressional photos of everybody, because there's many who voted against FEMA funding. I'm just talking about the loudest on the internet and on Fox, but these are them right here. And this was on Kamala HQ yesterday. It's called Trump's Project 2025 calls for cutting FEMA aid. And it says, these are the Republicans who voted against FEMA funding 2 weeks ago. Look how many there are. These are the Republicans in Congress. These are the people voting against the disaster relief fund. If you're curious who they are, MAGA, if you want to know the truth, and for once stop being lied to and spreading misinformation and disinformation, their names are all here, and they're all Republicans. And again, this is just, I thought this was good. This was on MSNBC yesterday. These are clips of mostly all Republicans, local Republicans on the state level, saying they have everything they need from FEMA and from the Biden-Harris administration.
What has been the ongoing kind of federal assistance for South Carolina?
It's been superb. We're getting assistance, and we're asking for everything we need.
They're doing a great job. There can always work harder. There's always kinks in the slinky. We're working them out behind the scenes.
And you see this rush of local officials, FEMA, from the federal to the state to the local emergency management agencies, local county mayors with tears in their eyes out there serving their people.
We're grateful for the quick actions and close communications that we have had with the president and with the FEMA team.
We have been, Sean, I have to say, working well with FEMA. They, in fact, were moving very quickly over the last few days for us.
So to President Biden, thank you for coming. Thank you for paying attention to our needs. I think we've had good working relationship between the federal government.
There's Flip Flop himself from South Carolina saying that they have a good working relationship with the federal government. What do you know? Poor Senator Flip Flop. He does. And this is one more video because, you know, you can never be too thorough. This is a FEMA administrator, another one, talking yesterday to Jake Tapper.
We are in the communities across Western North Carolina. I have been with Governor Cooper for the last week and understanding and talking to the local officials about where their needs are, which is why we've surged in more resources. And they are going from the pods to people's doorsteps to make sure that they have the food and supplies. We are going to continue, Jake, to have that level of presence and sustain that operation, because we also know that they're going to be a long time before the water and the power is restored we're going to have to continue bringing these resources in to everybody that's been impacted, especially in these more remote areas that have limited access.
But have all of the remote areas been reached?
At this point, we have teams that are every county that has been impacted. We've been working with the state to make sure we have not missed anybody. As I was with Governor Cooper this morning, we're getting positive news about progress being made. But we don't want to stop. We do want to make sure we have reached everybody. And so we're tracking that, and we're going to make sure that we continue to support the governor as long as he's needed.
Huh. Interesting. And you remember I was debating someone yesterday, his name was Matt, and he was just saying, well, it doesn't matter what the truth is because everyone just believes that the Biden-Harris administration isn't doing anything. Yeah. And the bottom line is, do you want to elect people who are pathologically lying to your face? Same thing with, he said J.D. Vance won the debate because he just was likable. It's like, do you care that he's lying? I'm a person that I think that we should hold people accountable, right? People should tell the truth, especially when it comes to things like disaster relief, right? And it comes to, are people going to get the funding they need to rebuild their lives? If they'll lie about this, what will they not lie about? That's really what we need to ask ourselves. What will they not lie about? I don't think there's nothing at this point. I just wanted to quickly touch on the polling that I was mentioning, the New York Times Siena polling that came out Monday. And it's number one in the outline and articles, and you can listen to it also because it's a pretty long article, but it's really interesting. There are some very good signs for Kamala Harris in it. I just wanted to read some of them. Voters are now more likely, and this is for the first time. This is the first poll which Kamala Harris in New York Times Siena poll, where Kamala Harris has ever came out on top, like since she took over from Biden, right? Since she took over from Biden, 49-46, Kamala Harris, in national polling, right? And then voters are now more likely, for the first time, to credit Vice President Kamala Harris than Donald J. Trump with representing change and caring about people like them, as Ms. Harris takes a slim lead nationally in the race for the White House. So again, and there's many more things, but like I said, for New York Times Siena polling, at this stage in the game, we're inside 30 days left in the election, and she's peaking. This is the most promising New York Times poll we have ever had for Kamala Harris. So I think that's for me, because I am over, I always err on the side of caution. I'm always going to say it's never enough. We need to keep pushing till the very end, till the finish line. I'm going to assume we're behind until the election is called and all Trump's ridiculous lawsuits have been thrown out of court. But this is a good indicator for us at this point. And then I wanted, just outside of the polls, once the averages are being brought in, I'm just going to give you guys an update. There's a toggle at the top. You can go to swing state ratings, because at this point we want to be looking at, because of the gross electoral college, we want to be looking at the toss-up states. So again, Pennsylvania is Harris +1, Michigan Harris +2, Wisconsin Harris +2, Nevada Harris +1, Georgia Trump +1. But if you know anything about the last New York Times Siena poll, it was like Trump +5. So now it's Trump +1, which moving in the right direction. North Carolina, Trump up less than 1. So, these are all within the margin of error, just to be clear. So, but Trump up less than a point. And Arizona, Trump +2. If you remember the last New York Times Siena poll, I think Trump was it was 5 or 6 in Arizona. So we're moving in the right direction, right? I am personally taking us on the journey in the battleground state of Arizona. If Arizona is Trump's biggest lead, right, I think we're doing good. And God knows they are pushing, the Democratic Party is pushing like I've never seen them push in swing states. So I just wanted to give you guys the good news on polling. It is looking pretty good. The good news for Trump is they're saying that he's up in Texas and in Florida. I think that's pretty fair. I've long thought that Florida has become Republican stronghold in a way. So I personally don't see anything like that's in line with exactly what I think is going on. Like, not surprising. I've never considered, even though there's good numbers coming out of Texas and Florida for the Democratic Party, there's hope, there's good races to focus on and things that are hopeful. In that, I still think that the bottom line is that we shouldn't count on Texas or Florida being in the blue column, and I never have. So what we need to focus on is pulling North Carolina over the line, pulling Arizona over the line, pulling Georgia. You know, we got to focus on the swing states, control the controllable, and we will. So that's the update on that. I just want to again briefly remind you guys, I'm going to end the live just a little early because I have a long day. So the second gentleman of the United States rally, I will be covering and live streaming for you guys tonight. Kamala's husband, Doug Emhoff, will be rallying in Arizona for Kamala and Tim Walz. So I will be there live streaming. I'm hoping to be live streaming by 5:30 and get you guys the best views of the speeches and whatever possible. So if I can go live a little earlier, I will, but I'd say 5:30 Pacific time, 8:30 Eastern at the latest. I'll be covering the Doug Emhoff rally in Arizona. Then tomorrow, look for more information in the Discord because I'm waiting for emails on, I'm taking us to Tucson tomorrow where Tim Walz is rallying for Kamala Harris. So that's hundreds of miles away. If you want to contribute on Venmo or Cash App for gas money, that would be much appreciated. All the money I get is basically just reinvested into this. This is my life. You guys know I don't have another life. So for the next month, I definitely do not have another life. So again, today will be at 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern time at the Doug Emhoff rally in the battleground state of Arizona. Then tomorrow I'm taking us to Tucson to catch Tim Walz rallying in Arizona. And Thursday, pending approval, we might even get to see Kamala on the live stream. We shall see. So yeah, busy week and then possibly more this weekend, but I'm going to just try to make it through Thursday alive and then we will refocus. But when I know more about Thursday's rally and officially who's headlining it, I suspect it's Kamala in Arizona. I will let you guys know. Okay? So I feel so much better now that I debunked all that FEMA stuff. That was literally killing me inside listening to all those lies. Again, all of these resources we went through to debunk Republican lies about FEMA and what's going on with these natural disasters are available in the Discord, and they are all lies. Okay, so I'll see you guys later tonight at 5.